This week's edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight is brought to you by Leff Atlanta Media, Atlanta's best journalist database. Subscribe at leffsatlantamedia.com. Welcome to the next edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight. We are talking today, I'm going to try that again, with Brian Clark, who's with a new publication, a new digital media outlet called the Georgia Sun. Good afternoon, Brian. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Mitch. Good to see you.
So I guess let's just start with, tell us a little bit about what the Georgia Sun is all about and where we can find it and what kind of things you're going to be covering.
All right, so the Georgia Sun is kind of an interesting hybrid. Um, as you know, we tend to have two types of media outlets, particularly in the digital world for state news. One is state coverage, and that generally means state house and covering the legislature. And then there are types that cover one city or one county. The Georgia Sun does both. So we have the statewide issues, but we also cover local issues in every city and county. Obviously, in rural Georgia, there's not as much going on, but if there's something that we see that's interesting that our audience would want to read about, we'll cover in more of a local area. That gives us kind of that, the trick with digital publications has always been you have to have a broad audience in order to get the page views that you need. So this allows us to do both. So it's kind of, we cover state issues and we'll also go local. Can't hear you, Mitch.
So when you say state issues, are you thinking, are you talking more kind of legislative, those kinds of issues, or kind of government kind of activities? When you, or are they kind of more featurey? What kind of content are we talking about?
I mean, we'll cover all of it. So for State House coverage, we do pull stories from the three nonprofit services that Georgia has to give us that news. We're more of a issues type of coverage, so we might take some of those legislative issues and kind of springboard off of them and do deeper stories. So one of the ongoing series that we're doing this year is called Healthcare in Crisis, where we're looking into, Georgia tends to rank near the bottom in healthcare. So any chance we get to look into that and cover it, we're going to give that to our readers.
Yeah. And is how long have you been? How long has the Georgia Sun been around at this point, right? As we're talking today.
The Georgia Sun has been around since 2019.
Okay.
I took it over last year.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that you had taken it over. I wasn't familiar with it before that, so I'm glad I saw that you did, so I can check it out. Obviously, they weren't letting me know that it was around, so that's good to see. So, what's is it you? Is it you and some other staff? How's the staffing work?
We're not big enough to have an actual staff, so I have a merry band of interns and freelancers.
Okay.
Um, so that a couple of contractors that we use, but yeah, all total, it's probably about 5 people involved.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty good team to. I mean, obviously, you're trying to cover around the state, but that's not a bad team to kind of get started with, and then you grow, right? So soon you'll have hundreds. Uh, are there some topics you're looking at kind of down the road a little bit? Saying, you mentioned healthcare, but are some other topics that are either local or statewide issues that you think we want to get to that?
So if there's you know, one core thing I would like to do with the Georgia Sun, it would be to, I've lived in Georgia all my life. Um, there are a couple of things that have just always been sticking points for residents here. Um, One of them we mentioned before, we tend to rank toward the bottom in healthcare. We also tend to rank toward the bottom in education. I don't really know how many Georgia residents are aware of that. So anything we can do to raise awareness, put stories out there to inspire people to act. That's kind of what I'd like to do. We don't tell people how to think. We don't tell people what their views should be, but we do put the problems out there for them to take on if they see it as a problem.
Yeah, that I mean, I see, I hear that, and that's good. So kind of looking at your site, obviously you're pulling from a couple of the news, the not as you said, the nonprofit sources too. So that's going to supplement what you're able to do too. So you don't necessarily have to be at every legislative hearing, that kind of
Mhm.
thing, right?
Right.
Yeah. Um, okay. Well, let's go to tell us a little, I mean, you and I have known each other for a long time, but for our viewers and listeners who don't know you as long as I have, walk me through kind of your journalistic history that what brought you to this spot.
All right. Well, for me, my teachers in elementary school kind of figured out I had a knack for writing and pushed that more. And then by sixth grade, I kind of knew I wanted to be a journalist. I was inspired by people like Louis Grizzard and Celestine Sibley, the old columnists from back in the day. And I fell in love with journalism and, learned it, lived it, loved it. Um, Started in about 2004 at the Alpharetta Neighbor as a beat reporter. Um, and then over the course of my 20 years at the Neighbor, um, worked up to managing editor. And then from about 2016 until I left, I was the digital director for the whole company. So, I've always had one foot in journalism and one foot in digital. So having the opportunity to be the publisher of the Georgia Sun was kind of the perfect marriage of that.
That's good, and obviously there's a kind of a revenue side to that too. So you're looking for the advertising and partnership opportunities also as part of this.
Mhm.
Yeah. So if someone wants to advertise, then you're probably the guy to talk to, right?
They can talk to me. Also, we do have a ad rep, Lindsay Mascarello. You can reach her at lindsay@thegeorgiasun.com.
Yeah. So you said this the Sun started in 2019. Um, was that was it kind of the same concept before, or have you kind of taken it to another level?
The concept hasn't changed. I have kind of amped it up a bit, but the philosophy of it was something I agreed with, and that's basically one of the big things that differentiates us is we're one thing I learned from doing digital for Times Journal was that our readers are not always as informed as the journalists that we hang out around. So we would see a lot of traffic to stories that were 4 or 5 days old. And one of the things that the Georgia Sun does differently is we're not concerned about being first, though we can. We've been first on a couple of stories, but generally, we want to make sure that our readers understand the news. So you'll notice anything that we write tends to have that Axios style smart brevity format to kind of give people, it's still short, it's still quick and brief to the news. So we really want to show people, the context, help them understand it, give them kind of next steps. So how can you take action? What can you do? It's not just there was a fire on Third Street. It's how can you help the victims of the fire?
Okay. Yeah, a little bit beyond just the hard news. It's more little bit of the news plus, right?
Trying to have that useful journalism.
So that kind of it's interesting that Axios model, that I've seen a couple of publications that seem to be uh, kind of using that kind of as a digital model, and can you describe that? Describe that. I mean, for folks who might not have seen it yet.
So the way that smart brevity works, and there is the Axios folks wrote a book about it, but it's basically got several different rules about how you can write in a way that is just captivating to your readers, and it breaks up the text so that it's not just this gray wall and they get bored reading it. But it's just things that are, one syllable is better than two syllables is better than three syllables, and just kind of reminding us to keep it short. And also, remember the capabilities of our audience. Unfortunately, for those of us who love the written word, um, the majority of Americans read at a sixth grade level or lower. So a lot of our audience does tend to be functionally illiterate. So long form journalism, while it has its place, to keep people informed, that shorter, quick form of it is better. And one of the things you'll also notice that we do, because we've taken the smart brevity concept and then kind of developed our own style around it. Um, but one of those things is we do try to keep in mind declining literacy rates. And we'll put definitions of words that our readers may hear all the time, but maybe they don't know them. So we do try to put things in there to just give them extra information to help them get through some of the articles.
That's interesting because I'd always heard that kind of that, a lot of newspapers are targeted on an eighth grade reading level. So it's interesting to hear you saying sixth grade, not even eighth grade.
When I was at the Neighbor, we tried for sixth grade, but honestly, it's hard. We do try for sixth grade at the Georgia Sun, but generally, you take any journalist, the best you're going to get out of them is about a 10th grade level,
Yeah.
because we do like big words, clever turns of phrase. But I think having that there helps us keep it simple.
Well, and yeah, and I think if the if you obviously if you make it too hard for the reader, they're not gonna they're not gonna read it at all. And I've seen some papers where they'll come out with like a special report or a special investigative story, and it's like you know 6 broad pages of just solid text with some pictures thrown in, and I'm like, I kind of look at that sometimes. And I'm like, okay, I have to invest in that, right? If I see a 4 page story, I got to think, okay, this is going to take me an hour or more to really read this, right? And I think that throws people off. I mean, I know some people. I mean, and I appreciate that you want to do that. You want to give the detail, but I sometimes feel like, okay, if you're going to do that, then break your big story into,
Mhm.
3 or 4 sub stories
Yeah,
so that,
I would break it
right,
into parts for sure.
right.
Uh,
I mean, when I look at that, and I'm not going to name papers, but I've seen like this, when I used to read it in paper, you open up a paper and it's like, well, where am I going to start here?
well,
It's
now, Mitch, papers are not that wide anymore.
oh yeah, broadsheets, they call them broadsheets, it's like this wide, Brian. It's huge. It's
Used
gigantic.
to be.
I'm
I
showing
took
showing
part
my
in a
age,
lot
right?
of those meetings where it was, oh, we're going to shrink the web size by an inch,
Oh
over
yeah,
and
yeah,
over and over.
right, yeah. You got to maximize the
Mhm.
print versus the number of words you've got in there. Um, so it's interesting, and I'm fascinated as people talk about, oh, media is, these media outlets are failing or whatnot. I'm seeing every time I see a media outlet kind of shrink, I see another publication like yours pop up. And I feel like, I mean, obviously it's a more economical to do a digital site than try and print and deliver newspapers, right?
Oh,
Uh,
definitely,
but
definitely.
also kind of delivering to people in where and how they consume. And obviously you've determined that people are consuming media digitally and on their smartphones and on pads and devices that way rather than sitting and reading a print paper, right?
Yeah, and also it's one of those things that we look at. We try to attract a younger audience. Um, Newspaper readers are dying out. The type of person that used to sit down and watch an evening newscast is dying out. So we really do have to reach people where they are. And kind of, for news, the harder part of that now is, um, people are getting their news from TikTok. And we also have to adapt to that change of, how do you give people who aren't really interested in news at all what they need to know in video format.
So obviously you guys have, there's the Georgia Sun website. Are there other social media platforms like TikTok where people can find the Georgia Sun
Yeah,
stories?
you can find us on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, all the regular ones. We're also on Nextdoor, which has been quite interesting. Um,
Interesting in terms of the responses you get, or just kind of the
my
functionality of
next
trying to do
column is going to be about the fun people that I've encountered on Nextdoor over the years. Um,
it. It is
Stay
interesting
tuned
how
for that.
it is interesting how that platform works and some of the reactions you get to
Mhm.
people who are talking about their neighbors, right? All
Yeah.
right, so let's jump now to what most consider the most challenging question of the four questions journalist spotlight is, what is the coolest thing about Brian that people might not know?
I mean, I'm not really that
And
cool.
don't tell me you're not that cool. People tell me that. So
Um, so for me, I think, again, it's not cool, but I am kind of a history buff. And I mean like any history. It can be state history, world history. If there's anything that I suddenly decide I'm interested in, the first thing I want to know is the history of it. So that's kind of my jam. I am the guy who would rather watch a documentary than whatever the hottest TV show is.
is there a kind of particular period of history that really interests you or fascinates you?
It used to be the Civil War because of the whole brother versus brother thing.
Right?
Um, Now it's really more kind of like presidential and political history. Politics was my minor in school, so that's always drawn me in.
Well, I feel like it's interesting that people look at often they look at politics and government as, this has never happened before. It's never been this good or this bad or anything before. And, anyone who studies politics and political history will tell you, A, it's probably been a lot worse
Mhm.
in terms of presidential campaigns and presidential corruption or government or presidential or service or whatnot. And, and people's understanding of history, I find, doesn't go back more than 25 or 30 years usually.
It's just their lifetime usually. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, my sense of it's always been the world's always been on the brink. That just looks different depending on what era you're living
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, there's that. All right. So next couple of questions, I call it kind of the lightning round. So you don't have to, we don't, just kind of short answers to kind of these things. So tell me the last book you've read or the last podcast you've listened to.
The last book I read was All That Unites Us by Dan Rather. Um, Again, I can't get away from journalism even in my free time, but Dan Rather was my news anchor. He's the one that I used to watch at 6:30 at night. Um, so when he wants to talk about the state of the nation, I'll listen.
Good. Um, Favorite local restaurant?
Um, Probably Sidelines. Um, they've got several.
I'm not familiar with that. Where's that one?
It's like it's like a family sports bar type of thing. There's a bunch of them in Cobb and Cherokee.
Uh,
Um, but yeah,
All right, I have to look
you
that up.
want to get
Okay.
wings, they're the place.
All right. Favorite guilty pleasure?
Um, Everyone that I've ever worked with finds my guilty pleasure to be kind of contradictory to the rest of my personality, but pro wrestling and Slim Jims would be
Oh,
my favorite
very good.
pleasures.
That
And
that
yes,
might. That
To
might
to
go be,
go
yeah.
to go
Yeah,
back
sorry,
to
yeah.
what I was saying, I always want to know the history of things. So I know more than I should about the history of pro wrestling.
We have a pro wrestling aficionado running our Department of Education. So there's that connection there too, right?
Hey, chair shots to unruly students is
That's right.
perfectly
That's
legal
right.
now.
I think I see some synergy there. All right. Favorite local getaway.
Sky Valley. We go on a mountain getaway in the fall, some years, not every year, and that's kind of the one that I've identified as my favorite in Georgia.
Okay. And last question is, what's your favorite non-work hobby?
Our non-work. I
You say,
I don't.
what is it?
What is
What is
non-work?
non-work? What does non-work mean?
Um, it's not really a hobby, but after, over a decade of infertility, I am really enjoying being a dad.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
that's what I'm doing in all of my spare time. Everything's for the kids.
And how old are the kids?
We've got a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a little girl on the way.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So we've been talking with Brian Clark, who is the editor publisher. Is that correct? Or just publisher?
Publisher.
Publisher of the Georgia Sun. And tell folks what's the website where they can find the Georgia Sun?
It is www.thegeorgiasun.com, and you
Yeah.
can reach me at btclark@thegeorgiasun.com.
Very good. Brian, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. And I encourage folks go check out the Georgia Sun and get some knowledge there. Uh, and of course, tune into our Four Questions Journal Spotlight on YouTube every other week, and for the video version. And you can find the audio version on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else you get your audio podcasts. And make sure to click that subscribe button at the bottom there if you're watching on YouTube right now. And as always, if you need our database of Atlanta media, go to leffsatlantamedia.com and sign up there. Thank you, Brian. We appreciate it.
Thank you.